A 5,000-pound bomb, the first of its kind ever fired in the history of warfare, collapsed Iran's coastal underwater and underground missile tunnels. It was nearly impossible to detect the missile launchers in these tunnels. Hidden within the mountains, beneath concrete, and at the bottom of the sea, they were invisible. Even if found, the number of powerful bombs required would have exceeded the capacity of any army. The Iranian military relied on this, but it took just one night to shatter that confidence. On March 17, CENTCOM announced that reinforced underground tunnels and facilities along the Iranian coastline near the Strait of Hormuz had been struck by numerous 5,000-pound deep penetrating bombs that had never seen combat. That night, under the cover of darkness and low-hanging clouds, the massive strike package moved in. EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft led the way, jamming the remaining radar and communication systems along Iran's coastline, rendering the strike fleet invisible. Following them, B-1B Lancer bombers took off from long-range bases, while F-15E Strike Eagles took off from bases in the region, likely Muwafaq Sulti in Jordan or Al Udeid in Qatar, and simultaneously headed toward the target. Both were carrying the same bomb, the GBU-72. The F-15E has a dual role, both air superiority and precision bombing. Pilots guided GPS-guided bombs directly into the tunnel entrances, opening several meters wide. Targets, underground missile complexes belonging to the IRGC Navy, hidden along the mountainous coastline near Bandar Abbas in the Hormuzan province, known as missile cities. These complexes are the heart of Iran's asymmetric warfare doctrine. The tunnel's features are impressive and intimidating. Typically 6 to 10 m high and 6 m wide, meaning a truck could easily pass through them. Their total length spans dozens of kilometers. Some sections feature shafts descending to depths of 100 to 500 m. Part of these tunnels lies underwater. Iran has actually shown its underwater missile tunnels to the public. Inside them are Carter 380L cruise missiles with a range of 1,000 kilometers, weapons capable of flying parallel to the sea surface to evade radar and sinking a supertanker on their own. A single missile launched from Bandar Abbas keeps the entire Gulf from Oman to the UAE and from Qatar to Bahrain within range. And these missiles aren't stationary. Mobile launchers move along rail systems, emerging from a tunnel, firing, and returning within seconds. And the real target of these missiles wasn't the tankers. The tankers were just bait. The real target was the US Navy. Iran's plan was this: force the US to intervene by closing the strait to civilian ships. Let the world apply pressure. Let oil prices skyrocket. And let the US say, "We have to open the strait." When US warships enter the narrow passage to open the strait, a 21 m wide corridor, strike them simultaneously with missile attacks from the shore, from tunnels, and from underwater. Sink an American destroyer, or better yet, damage an aircraft carrier, and break the US's will to fight. Just as in Vietnam, just as in Somalia, inflict sufficient casualties, and the US will withdraw. Hormuz was a trap. Commercial ships were the bait. The US Navy was the real target, and the coastal tunnels were the trigger for this trap. However, that night, B-1Bs and F-15E dropped GBU-72s at the tunnel entrances. Each bomb weighs 2.3 tons, 2.5 times the weight of standard munitions. The bomb does not detonate on the surface. It burrows into the ground, penetrates more than 50 m, and collapses the structure from within. The blast wave becomes trapped in the tunnel corridor, creating a far more destructive effect than it would in open terrain. A GBU-72 entering through a tunnel entrance can render everything unusable all the way to the launch gallery at the end of the corridor. A B-1B can carry 34 tons in a single sortie. A single aircraft can shut down multiple tunnel entrances in a single pass. F-15Es targeted specific entry points with more precise strikes. And for deeper targets, B-2 Spirits provided support with 14-ton GBU-57 Giants. But now the key question. Iran claimed these tunnels went down to depths of 100 to 500 m. The GBU-72, however, penetrates only 50 m. So how did the US Air Force manage to destroy these launch sites? Because the US didn't target the bottom of the tunnels, it didn't have to. It's impossible to launch a missile from 300 m deep. It has to emerge at the surface or into a shallow gallery. launch points, tunnel entrances, exit corridors, all are below 50 m. The US struck precisely those points. You might not be able to demolish the castle wall, but you can demolish the gate. An army can hold its ground inside a castle with a demolished gate, but it cannot exit or fight. The missiles might be deep underground, but if the launch routes have collapsed, they're just piles of expensive metal. A missile that can't be launched. It exists, but it's useless. But the hardest part of the operation wasn't dropping the bomb. The real challenge was finding the target. The regime's most powerful weapon, the famous missile cities, has become the greatest death trap in modern military history. The Epic Fury operation, which began on February 28, 2026, was a rare display of force in American aviation history. And the most devastating moment of this operation took place on March 2, 2026. The targets were the massive ballistic missile complexes carved into the mountains near Karamabad in Lorestan province and Tray in East Azerbaijan province, which cost billions of dollars to build. The first target was the Karamabad underground facility known as the Imam Ali base. This facility was Iran's largest ballistic missile complex. A massive underground city consisting of tunnels ranging from 36 to 50 kilometers in length, a labyrinth where hundreds of Shahab 3 variant missiles were stored, launch pads were concealed, and ammunition depots were lined up. This was the backbone of Iran's regional deterrence. The operation was nearly impossible for a bomber like the B-52. However, Iran's air defense network, which relied on early warning radars based on copying technologies, was rendered blind in the first hours of the operation by simultaneous cyber attacks and electronic warfare elements. This initial phase prevented personnel hundreds of meters below ground from grasping the scale of the danger on the surface. With the radar screens blacked out, the Iranian military could not see the impending destruction and its defense systems were disabled. When this window of complete vulnerability in the airspace opened for just 48 hours, the U.S. Air Force deployed the B-52 Stratofortress, the heavyweight of its strategic bomber fleet, to strike Iran. On the night of March 2, bombardment salvos from B-52s descended like a nightmare upon the largest underground missile arsenal in Karamabad. The operation's core architecture was based on a layered destruction strategy. In the first phase, B-2 Spirit aircraft silently infiltrated Iranian airspace and dropped 30,000 pounds GBU-72 bunker busting bombs on the targets. These bombs penetrated deep into the mountains, destroying the main doors and critical support columns in seconds. The aerodynamic design of the GBU-57 munitions combined with gravitational acceleration generates extraordinary kinetic energy. This energy, capable of penetrating 60 m of reinforced concrete and hard rock, creates a seismic shock wave upon impact that causes irreparable structural cracks within the tunnel systems. Immediately afterwards, B-1 Lancer and B-52 Stratofortress aircraft arrived in the area. The B-1 Lancer aircraft with their supersonic speeds entered and exited the battlefield, hunting down mobile air defense batteries one by one. Subsequently, the B-52s blasted surface support buildings, ventilation shafts, communication antennas, and power transmission lines off the map with thousands of pounds of JDAM smart munitions. More than 8 main tunnel entrances were crushed in seconds by bunker-busting bombs. GBU-57s plunged into the mountain, collapsing key passageways. The inner parts of the tunnels collapsed. Massive explosions ejected huge fireballs from inside the mountains to the outside. Heat signatures from NASA's firm satellite systems recorded extraordinary temperature increases in the area after the attack. The chain reaction explosion of ammunition depots inside the mountains created massive heat waves that reached the surface. Karamabad fell. Iran's largest missile depot is now a pile of rubble. As Karamabad burned, the Tray silo complex in East Azerbaijan province shared the same fate. This facility with its 100 kilometers long tunnel network was the main source of Iran's retaliatory missiles fired at Erbil and the region. With the longest tunnel network, this facility was Iran's second largest missile arsenal. It had already suffered heavy damage during the June 2025 operations, but the regime had rebuilt it. During the first wave of attacks on February 28 to March 1, the entrances and support points of the underground tunnel network were buried under intense bombardment. The massive compartments inside the facilities may have protected the missiles from complete destruction, but with the ventilation, electrical, and elevator systems destroyed, the missiles and personnel inside were physically unable to reach the surface. They could not fire missiles, dig tunnels, or communicate with the outside world. Imagine you're in a tunnel 80 m underground in the dark without air, shaken by bombs. And above them, US surveillance planes circle 24/7. Every movement is detected instantly. If someone tries to open an entrance, a GBU-31 will land on that spot within minutes. And here's the most terrifying detail. According to intelligence reports, between 100 and 1,500 Revolutionary Guard military personnel stationed at these two facilities, Hormuz and Tabriz, were left in absolute darkness and suffocation hundreds of meters underground when the tunnel covers collapsed on top of them. This figure is only for these two facilities. When considering all the dozens of underground bases across the country, the picture is much more dire. It is reported that there are nearly 100 underground facilities across the country. This means that an estimated 250,000 military personnel could be deployed in Iran's underground bases. Iran's total military strength is approximately 960,000 personnel. This means that nearly one-third of the army is underground. One quarter of a 960,000 strong army being trapped in their own shelters rather than on the battlefield is an unprecedented situation in modern warfare history. Generals have fled. Over 50 high-ranking commanders have been eliminated. Barracks have been emptied. Iran never anticipated this scenario. But it doesn't end there. Preparations on the ground point to a much larger wave to come. The economic and asymmetric intelligence displayed by the US in this process further deepens the scale of the event. In the first wave, billions of dollars worth of B-2 aircraft were used to blind radars and air defense systems. However, after the gates were broken, the old but deadly B-52 Stratofortress aircraft took the stage. Another strategic dimension of the incident is the involvement of British bases. The US administration deployed 3 B-52H heavy bomber aircraft to the RAF Fairford base in the UK. This move proves that Operation Epic Fury is not a short-term raid, but a long-term operational campaign. Using closer bases such as the UK and Diego Garcia instead of flying from across the ocean will significantly increase the number of sorties. American bombers have begun to maintain a constant presence in Iranian airspace on a rotating basis. This creates uninterrupted psychological and military pressure on the Tehran regime. Aircraft poised to drop bombs at any moment are wiped out. The military personnel's hopes of regrouping. The UK's approval of airspace access also signals that the international diplomatic front has united against Iran and that TAN's strategic isolation is deepening. Why were B-52s from the 1960s used instead of B-2 aircraft? Because while the operational cost of a B-2 aircraft runs into hundreds of thousands of dollars, the flight hour cost of a B-52 is around $70,000. Once air superiority was secured, there was no longer a need for expensive stealth technology. The B-52s served as flying arsenals with their massive ammunition capacities. These giants, cruising freely in the sky, relentlessly delivered cheap but effective blows to every target attempting to surface from underground. This situation clearly demonstrated how a cost-effective war machine could also economically strangle the enemy. This developing asymmetry is also a signal that the US could sustain the operation for weeks. So why is this massive destruction so important? Looking at the ripple effect, we understand that the issue is not just about a few collapsed tunnels. The heart of Iran's military doctrine was built on the concept of missile cities. Indeed, they had been preparing for this moment for 40 years. They dug hundreds of kilometers of tunnels into the mountains. They buried thousands of ballistic missiles, launch pads, ammunition depots, and command centers 80 to 90 m underground. They called this the missile cities. Silos in Korgo, 50 kilometers tunnel networks in Hormuz, 100 kilometers corridors in Tray, missile storage canyons in Shiraz. Each one is an underground city. The regime was so confident in this that it called on its people to prepare for a long war of 5 years. The striking of the Hurabat and Tabriz complexes led to an unprecedented humanitarian tragedy and logistical disaster within the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Collapsing mountain masses left over 1,000 elite personnel working at these facilities trapped hundreds of meters underground. The immediate military consequences of this operation are presenting themselves as a logistical choke point. The closure of the facility's entrances prevented missiles from being brought to the surface. According to CENTCOM's official statement, just 4 days after the Epic Fury operation began on February 28, as of March 4, Iran's ballistic missile launches decreased by 86% and one-way attack drone launches decreased by 73%. Admiral Brad Cooper announced that over 1,700 targets had been struck. A significant portion of Iran's missile stockpiles and UAV munitions were destroyed. In short, Iran has lost its ability to retaliate. Every ramp attempting to launch missiles from the mountains was destroyed within minutes by US drones and fighter jets waiting overhead. Every target that emerged to fire was immediately hunted down. From a tactical standpoint, the simultaneous use of 3 different bomber aircraft with perfect synchronization requires advanced planning skills. When the stealth of the B-2S, the speed of the B-1S, and the massive munitions capacity of the B-52s came together, Iran's military infrastructure was literally wiped out. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth summed up the situation in a single sentence: "This was never a fair fight. We're punching them while they're down." Looking at the bigger picture,